So, hello everyone. We have the last session of the day, and Steve Agostino is going to be talking about the things that we need to keep in mind when we're developing mobile games, and we're either collecting data or providing where the user is placed. There's all these different nuances that if we don't keep them in mind, they can get us in trouble. So Steve is going to be talking about that.
Okay, this is on. Good. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Steve Agostino. I am really happy to be headlining the Triple Door stage here at Casual Connect. I know you guys have been waiting 3 days through this games festival, we'll call it, for a legal talk, and I'm going to talk to you about pitfalls in mobile games, specifically 4 pitfalls that I think you ought to really think about in your games as you are particularly making these for mobile phone systems. So we're going to talk about these couple of different things here. First of all, I'm going to start with this very colorful slide here that talks about mobile apps and mobile games. And the primary reason for this is because, quite honestly, most legal slides are just bullet point text and aren't exactly the most exciting things. So this is a little bit of visual candy for you as we get started. Here is just a depiction of the mobile phone system, the mobile games, and the interaction between the app or the game. In particularly, a couple different things coming through on this. Consumer costs, obviously, games can be freemium, free to download, free to play, or premium. There could be other data charges that apply for certain things. It's more in the apps than the games right now, but I'll say right now for the moment. And billing could be through your wireless carrier, which could have an impact later as we talk about this. Another one showing the overall flow. Again, the examples here are applications. They aren't necessarily games. The important thing is the green ones here are all user data that is flowing off to different places. That has implications for a couple of the pitfalls that I want to talk about here, because this illustrates the many different places that the user data goes. And you have to make sure that you secure each and every one of those various places, because if any of those result in a breach of some sort, it could work its way back to you as a developer, or the publisher, or back to the store itself. So it's an important part to be careful with this. One more thing, just as an overview here, taking a look at this is the download process and the screens. Screens, obviously, are extremely small. Talking with a couple of different people the last couple of days, talking about a change in a privacy policy for a particular carrier, and the policy was 168 screens on a mobile phone. And I am sure that each and every user wandered through all 168 pages of those to read the scintillating text. Here, a couple different things. What we highlighted here is the location data, because I will be talking about location-based games and location-based apps, so some of the specific issues that come about with location in particular. Now on to talking about the phones. The next few slides are really to kind of give some flavor and illustrate what we all know, which is that mobile phones are ridiculously popular right now. This is actually a little bit, it's dated September 10th of 2010, but this is a little bit dated information. The latest FCC report on cell phones shows a penetration rate of 92%. And in fact, every age range that they had was over 90%, except for seniors 65 and older. Their penetration rate was only 89%. So we're definitely seeing cell phones. The other interesting fact that came out of the most recent FCC report, which I did not have time to add to this presentation, was that for the first time, we have an age group that has cut the cord on wireless, that more than 50% of that age group is, they cut the cord on wireline, rather. They are wireless only. The adults 25 to 29 in the latest FCC study showed that 55.7% of them were wireless only subscribers. So this is only going to get get larger as you look at the population and the percentage on cell phones. Now, with respect to the revenues, obviously we have seen this and we all know this. The revenues are exploding on the app stores and on mobile games in particular, among others. This is the App Store, the Google Android market, and Nokia and BlackBerry stores only, but predicted to be about $4 billion in revenue in the US this year. In terms of downloads, you see the same kind of explosion of the number of downloads. I think that the Apple Store, the data showed for January somewhere around 9 billion app downloads in the App Store itself. So it's pretty impressive what's going on there. This is services. What's on the phones? This one is actually a little deceiving when you look at it because music looks huge there on the left side, but it's only on the iPhone that music is the most popular application and the most popular download. In fact, when you discount the iPhone and you look at the other platforms, games are the single most downloaded application on the device. And in fact, I have one more stat here that came out. This was from a Nielsen study released earlier this month that showed games as the most popular app download. 64% downloaders were downloading games. That beat weather at 60%, social networking, Facebook at 56%, and maps at 51%. This Nielsen study also said that app downloaders were most willing to pay for games, as we're talking about the freemium versus premium. 93% of downloaders are willing to pay for games, according to this study. And in particularly, this is not a huge surprise, on the Apple iPhone and the Android, they spend a significant amount of time playing games. In fact, on the iPhone, it's almost twice as much as the average elsewhere. So games are the thing on the phones, and we are definitely seeing that in many, many different places. Last slide is the setup here. This is what do they pay for, and how much do they pay? I think this one was really interesting to me in the debate, and it came up just a little bit ago in the last one as well. Are we moving to a freemium, free-to-play market within the games? And you know, when you look at this is of how much people pay for their apps, and this is all apps, not just games, but again, you know, the last one said that people were most willing to pay for games. It's pretty evenly spread between less than $1, which would include free, $1 to $1.99, $2, $3, and then $5 or more. It's pretty evenly spread out there. So I think that the demand is there, and the willingness to pay for content that people value is there. So there are markets, there are multiple ways in which you can get to your customers, whether it's free downloads or premium model. They're all available as well. Okay, now on to the legal landscape, and let's talk a little bit about the three entities that are really overseeing the games market on mobile devices. The first one here to cover is the Federal Trade Commission. They have jurisdiction over companies who are non-telephone companies. They are the primary consumer protection organization in the United States. They have been extremely active on a number of different fronts here. A couple warnings to come out of this. This is their privacy report from December of 2010. All companies involved in information collection and sharing on devices, and that includes applications and advertisers, according to the FTC, have to provide meaningful choice to consumers. So that's going to be one of the pitfalls that we really talk about here. Again, just last month, 2 months ago now, FTC staff testified in front of Congress and said, we're looking at mobile devices in particular, and particularly children, marketing to children on mobile devices, which has some real pitfalls and things to be concerned with. So that's the FTC. We know they're on the job. You've got the FCC, which regulates the carriers and the networks, and they're also on the job here. And they do have authority over privacy and the use of data and the use of information. Now, their authority is over the networks and over the carriers. So there's a section, CP&I is the fancy telecom word for privacy. But Section 222 of the Communications Act covers that, but it covers information about the use of a telecom service. So it wouldn't cover games itself, but it would cover what your carrier partners are doing. Cable privacy, that's more on online. Wiretapping, I somehow left out the satellite version, but that's also in here. But nevertheless, despite the FCC's traditional focus on carriers, they have, in the last 2 years under Chairman Janikowski, taken a pretty broad view of their investigatory authority. They haven't taken actions yet, but they have sent a number of letters to Apple, a number of letters to Google about the way in which they operate their stores, to Google about the way in which a number of its services operate that Google treats as non-regulated. And they had confirmed that they had an investigation ongoing about Google's Street View service, which is where they gathered information through Wi-Fi networks, open Wi-Fi networks. And according to Google, they inadvertently collected user password and other personal user information. They didn't realize that their Street View mapping was going to gather that. They were trying to get information about what Wi-Fi networks were out there so that they could use that information. We've seen also the Apple iPhones gather information about Wi-Fi. So the FCC thinks that they have jurisdiction over that because Wi-Fi is within their jurisdiction. So they're looking here. The Verizon mystery fee consent decree, which is a $25 million fine that Verizon paid, that was for charging consumers for mobile download data byte usage, which they had not fully disclosed. And then most recently, there's a guidance request on text messaging and how you classify that. So to the extent that you are using text messaging as a marketing method, you definitely need to be aware of this and think about that. There are restrictions on that. And I want to identify actually in the cramming NPRM as well. Cramming is the imposition of unauthorized charges on your telephone bills. It's traditionally a landline problem because entities will be able, you can bill a variety of different things to your traditional landline phone, but you also can bill purchases to your wireless phone. And one of the things in the cramming NPRM is, should they be addressing that now, and do they need to look at that? They're considering requiring, either prohibiting landline carriers from doing third-party billing or requiring them to advertise automatic blocking for consumers. So if they apply to those types of rules to the wireless carriers as well, some potential payment methods for games might disappear as a result of that. So got to keep in mind the FCC as well as the FTC. And then lastly here, we got the United States Department of Commerce, which has also been very active in this. They, in particular, and the quote here I got up here is that they're concerned about location information and the use of location information from your phone, which obviously has some very valuable uses, particularly emergency uses. If you dial 911, they want to be able to make sure that they know where you are and that you can accurately identify the phone. But knowing where that phone is or where that phone has been can also create quite a picture of you and your life. And so they are very concerned about that. And that's actually one of the 4 pitfalls that I'm going to talk about is location information. So pitfall number 1 here, thing to talk about and thing to be concerned with. In-app purchases. This is in particular for the freemium model. It's free to play, but you hit a certain level, and if you want certain swords or powers or additional things, you got to buy it. And the commission, the chairman of the Federal Trade Commission stated in April that they were going to be looking into this, and I believe their investigations are non-public, but I believe that they are in fact looking at a number of different entities, including potentially some games companies, on in-app purchases, particularly the availability to children. So if you've got a game that is marketed to or used by children. Children are downloading it, and then they have the ability in the game to purchase items, you've got a consent issue there. And you've got to question something you've got to be very, very careful with on how you gather consent from the minor child who's the user of the device in order to bill them, typically from, which is the parent's credit card or the parent's mobile phone service itself. So there aren't any answers to that pitfall just yet, but this is something you have to be very, very careful with. The other reason we need to see it, you see it here, it all started about the same time. There was a class action complaint filed in April of 2011 against Apple for this. And the concern there is that they did sell in-game or in-app items through the iTunes stores to minors without parental knowledge or parental consent. Interestingly, the lawsuit was filed after Apple had changed its iOS service policies to require when you make an in-app purchase using your iTunes account, you have to enter the password. The time period for the class action complaint covers the time before that password policy was in effect, but also afterwards. One of the allegations is that the password policy itself is not enough protection because it's the same password you use for in-app purchases that you would use for the actual iTunes account itself. There's not a separate password, and so the concern is that that's not enough protection there. So this is one I think that that game companies really need to be concerned with. If you're thinking about purchases and allowing in-app purchases, keeping in mind who your user is, keeping in mind the size of the screen limits the amount of the disclosures that you can make. It makes it very, very difficult to address this. So you've got to be careful in this particular area. Next pitfall, I'm going to cover two of them together, and then I want to talk a little bit about some strategies on how to address it. This is a pitfall that applies across all issues. It's not just mobile games or mobile apps even. This applies in any time that you're collecting personal information online. This would apply to web browsing as well, but you got to be careful with this. The use of personally identifiable information that you've gathered. Now that's social security numbers, names and addresses, phone numbers can be PII. It also covers things like the credit card information, et cetera. So what the FTC is trying to move toward now is a concept that they call privacy by design. And what they are encouraging here is it's a set of best practices, really, that you're trying to codify or trying to institutionalize as standards that all developers must follow here. There was a recent settlement with Google over their Google Buzz service, and Google agreed to incorporate those privacy by design concepts. That's really the significant because that's the first time we've seen that. There's no legislation yet on privacy by design. This is really just an aspiration for the FTC, but it's also an indication of the way in which you can expect their investigations to go and the way in which you can expect them to try to move as they are resolving particular issues. What privacy by design really is you will collect only the information that you need. You will limit the collection. You'll disclose at the time of collection, so just-in-time collection. You will not retain it for longer than you need it, and you will be ensured that you destroy it afterwards. So it really is this idea that you look at privacy and the use of data as a whole, as a part of everything that you do. Now, a separate piece of that, but also in the same order, was the FTC's desire to develop some form of a do not track mechanism. And this is modeled somewhat on their do not call database, which is a national database. You can put your number in that database, and then marketers have to access those databases and make sure that they are not, in fact, marketing to those entities. The FTC is trying to develop a similar thing with do not track, making sure that it's comprehensive, making sure that it's easy to use, that it covers all things, not just behavioral advertising, which is one of the things that has been driving this. So, we will see this. This is the big issue, one of the big issues in Washington on Capitol Hill right now over what to do and how to handle this. So whether do not track moves forward, we will see over the next year or so. But even without it, the use of information is something you need to be careful with as you work through and as you plan your device, your game rather. Now a related pitfall, use of information, that's your intentional use, generally your intentional use, sometimes unintentional uses or unintentional accesses of it. But hacking of it or data security of that information is equally important. And we've all seen, we've heard about the Sony breaches and some of the other targets here. But so this was a quote from just earlier this month from the president of Sony Network Entertainment. Says almost every day it seems that a new story emerges is about a business or a government or public institutions or individuals becoming victims of this. This is interesting. Cyber crime wave is the way that Sony described this. You can see it. It happens. It can happen unintentionally. A breach like this. Go back to my first slide where I was showing the data flows. Your data can go in a number of different places. Your partners who are accessing that information, your payment processors and others who are assisting in your delivery of the game could have a breach. And they could be the weak link in your chain. You've got to watch those. In addition, there is the hacking aspect of it, like the LulzSec group that was targeting a number of entities, including 3 very prominent game companies. And they targeted Sony, at least, allegedly over their dissatisfaction with their policies on their games, piracy protection, digital rights management. But there was another famous instance of this in 2010. Apple iPad numbers were hacked. And again, here, to underscore that point, it's not always the data that you're going to have in your possession or while it's in your possession. The hacking was from the AT&T network. People obtained the iPad unique identifiers not from the iPad itself, but because the iPad communicates with the network, and on the AT&T network, people were hacking that and were able to get that information. So you got those 2 situations about breaches of data and where you can go. And these are my suggestions. This is the non-legal advice, legal advice part of this. I have to remind everybody when we do these sorts of things. These are discussions of general principles. Obviously, if you have specific circumstances and need specific legal advice, you need to consult a lawyer about that because your individual facts may alter some of the concerns or questions here. But a couple of general recommendations here. First and foremost, due diligence. Really, really think about the use of your data, where it's going, what it is. Look at it in your design process. Look at it from the consumer perspective, from the consumer experience. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. Communication, that's the disclosure and consent aspects of this. That also is a contractual aspect in dealing with your other partners. And then there will be contractual protections, or for most of the game developers, it's really contractual obligations. You're having certain obligations imposed upon you by the partners that you're dealing with, or by the developers. If you want it on a certain store, you're going to have certain obligations with respect to privacy and security. And you've got to know those policies very well. In the due diligence part of this, I want to start with the blue box here to emphasize. On mobile, these are general concepts and general concerns, but in mobile, they're heightened for a couple different reasons. Obviously, location-based information is on the phone and becomes available, so you've got to be careful with that, and I'll talk about location again in a minute. But your phone is with you all times, so it has a real permanence and presence to it, and the screen size presents some real challenges in getting your consumer notices out there. But But in the due diligence phase, I guess this is the part where I agree generally with the FTC's idea of privacy by design. Really ought to think about this. How does this fit? Who's going to have access to the data? What type of data? Are you sharing it with third parties? What are the consumers going to see? Are they being charged for things that they don't expect? Do all of this up front in the design process, and it will make your back end a lot easier to develop. Communication side of it, business partners, deal with your business partners to discuss who has what responsibilities and where it's going to be. Communicate with the consumers as best as you can, given the screen sizes. Be very plain. I think this really pushes for plain language in your disclosures on the phone itself. And mitigate your surprises. Test it, test it, test it. That was the Google Street View problem, I think. Location data. All right, this is the other one I really want to talk about. We see this mostly, I don't see this as much with games at the moment, but I see no reason why it won't come to games and gaming as well. Obviously, with targeted advertising, Groupon, and other types of situations, they want to know where you are to deliver to you ads and things that are meaningful to you. And those are all important, and they're all acknowledged as being beneficial. But at the same time, the government is very uneasy with the idea that this information is out there and that this information can be so readily collected. The FCC just held a forum on June 28th. It's open for public comment still. There's a staff report to be issued. So if you have location-based information in your game and you want that, I encourage you to come back to me and talk about it. I will give you more information. The carriers and service providers obviously said, hey, hands off right now, let this market develop. There are a number of guidelines that are already out there that you should be familiar with. The CTIA, that's the Wireless Association's guidelines. The DMA, the Digital Direct Marketing Association, has guidelines. There are other guidelines. The Mobile Marketing Association has guidelines as well. You at various times will be required to comply with those guidelines depending upon who your partner is. So you really should know those and be particularly careful about collecting location information. In fact, I would recommend at the moment you don't collect location information and don't retain location information if you do use it for anything. Congress has a couple of different bills. Very similar in these two bills, and this is not uncommon. What happens is you'll get a number of these things, and they sort of coalesce around certain ideas. Again, here it's customer consent on the collection, use, or disclosure of location information. There are some exceptions, emergency, but not as many in some of these. There are civil and criminal penalties, which is be very careful about the criminal penalties part of this. And private right of action, that's code for class action complaints. So watch out for anything that has private rights of action, but that seems to be the direction that is going here. I don't know that they're going to have enough consensus this year on location-based information. People, as I said, the government is very concerned about this. The FCC is concerned. The Department of Commerce is concerned. Congress is concerned. Everybody is looking at this right now. They are trying to figure it out, but they probably will not. I don't think we'll get legislation through this year on it. And then a related piece to location, of course, is the unintended use. I had some other slides in another presentation that talked about people that were using Facebook information, a pleaserobme.com type thing that would gather stuff people would publicize that they were going to be gone on a trip or something, and it's very public information. And between that and then being able to get your address and other information, they had this nice address here. Here are homes that are vacant, and if you'd like to go to them, go for it. So that type of stuff is out there. Be careful of those unintended uses. This is, again, cautions for real caution in what you collect and whether you keep it or whether you let any third parties get access to it. So that, in 30 minutes, is an overview of the 4 major pitfalls that I would recommend you be very concerned with. I appreciate the opportunity. Again, I love being up on this stage, and I'm very happy to have the chance to help close out the conference here. I will take questions if anybody wants to know anything else, and if now's your chance. If not, We will wish you all safe travels back. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll talk again soon.